The suggestion box. The Triaxian Empire had ruled the Andromeda sector for 3,000 years with absolute efficiency. Their bureaucracy was legendary: 12 million forms, 8 billion regulations, and zero tolerance for deviation. Emperor Kravix the Systematic had perfected governance through rigid hierarchy, and his flagship, the Eternal Protocol, exemplified this philosophy. Which is why nobody expected everything to fall apart because of a cardboard box. Dr. Mara Venn didn't look like a revolutionary. The xenobiologist from Earth Station 7 wore sensible gray coveralls and kept her auburn hair in a practical bun. She'd been assigned to the Triaxian flagship as part of the Human Triaxian Cultural Exchange Program, a diplomatic gesture neither species particularly wanted but both agreed looked good on paper. For 6 weeks, Mara had watched the Triaxians work. She'd observed their 17-hour shift rotations, their mandatory meditation breaks scheduled by Central Command, and their peculiar habit of filing reports about filing reports. The Empire ran on procedure and procedure ran on paperwork. The breaking point came during a routine resource allocation meeting. Mara sat in the observation gallery as Commander Zelfix spent 4 hours explaining why requisitioning new atmospheric filters required approval from 16 separate departments, each of which would take 6 weeks to process the request. The current filters were failing. 16 weeks was too long. Why not just ask the maintenance crew what they need? Mara suggested quietly. The room fell silent. 40 Triaxian officials turned to stare at her with their triple-jointed necks. Ask them? Commander Zelfix's voice carried the tone of someone confronting a completely alien concept. The people doing the actual work, Mara clarified. They probably know what they need better than someone 12 departments removed from the problem. Commander Zelfix blinked all 4 eyes in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion. But that would be unauthorized input from subordinate ranks. Such communication bypasses the chain of proper consultation. What if, Mara said slowly, you had a way for anyone to make suggestions? Anonymously so they don't worry about breaking protocol. Just a simple system for collecting ideas from the people who actually do the jobs. The commander's scales rippled with what Mara had learned was suppressed laughter. Dr. Venn, the Empire has functioned for millennia on the principle that wisdom flows downward from leadership. Your primitive human notion of bottom-up communication is charmingly naive, but it's just a box, Mara interrupted. A physical box where people drop written suggestions. You review them weekly. Try it for 1 month. If it doesn't help, throw it away. Commander Zelfix consulted with his superiors. After extensive deliberation and 47 forms, they agreed to humor the human. After all, the suggestion would fail, proving Triaxian superiority, and the documentation of this failure would make an excellent case study in Cultural Exchange Protocol Appendix 47B. They gave Mara permission to install her suggestion receptacle in the crew commons. She built it from a shipping container, decorated it with friendly colors and labeled it simply, "Got an idea? Drop it here." For 3 days nothing happened. Triaxian crew members walked past the box with the wariness of prey animals encountering an unfamiliar object. Some took pictures. Several filed reports about the box's existence. Nobody put anything inside. Then, on the 4th day, junior technician Rylax, who had spent 5 years trying to get approval to reorganize the tooling storage system, walked past the box during a moment when no one was watching. His triple-thumbed hand trembled as he dropped a folded paper through the slot. The next morning, 6 more suggestions appeared. By week's end, the box was stuffed with papers. Mara and Commander Zelfix reviewed them together. Relocate emergency oxygen stations closer to lower decks. Combine daily status reports into 1 weekly summary. Install better lighting in Engineering Section 7. Update the star charts database to include the new hyperspace routes. Simple ideas. Practical ideas. Ideas that would have taken months to filter up through proper channels, if they'd ever made it at all. Commander Zelfix read them with growing unease. These weren't complaints or insubordination. They were genuine improvements, many of which he'd never considered because he'd never spent time in those sections of the ship. "Dr. Venn," he said carefully, "what have you done?" Mara smiled. "I gave your crew permission to think." Within 2 weeks, the Eternal Protocol had implemented 17 suggestions. Response times improved. Equipment failures decreased. Morale, something Triaxians tracked with scientific precision, increased by 12%. Other ships heard about it. They wanted suggestion boxes too. And that's when Emperor Kravix learned that a human had just undermined 3,000 years of imperial governance with a cardboard box and a marker pen. The Imperial Summons. The Imperial decree arrived via official courier drone, its crimson hull gleaming with the Emperor's personal seal. Commander Zelfix's scales turned pale gray, the Triaxian equivalent of breaking into a cold sweat. "Dr. Venn," he said, his voice modulated to formal distress protocol level 7. "You've been summoned to the Imperial Throne World." Mara looked up from reviewing the latest batch of suggestions. Someone had proposed a brilliant reorganization of the cafeteria line that would save 18 minutes per meal period. Is that bad? The last person summoned to face Emperor Kravix the Systematic was General Thormax, who lost an entire battle fleet to a navigation error. He was reassigned to counting inventory on a frozen moon for 30 years. Zelfix's neck spines flattened against his skull. The Emperor doesn't appreciate disruption. I haven't disrupted anything. I've helped. You've introduced unauthorized efficiency improvements across 47 ships without proper authorization from the Department of Systematic Optimization. That's... Zelfix consulted his datapad. That's violating at least 600 regulations. The journey to Triax Prime took 3 days via Quantum Fold. Mara spent the time reading about Emperor Kravix. He'd ruled for 2 centuries, ascending to power through perfect adherence to every protocol and procedure. His dissertation, The Beauty of Bureaucratic Perfection, was mandatory reading in all Triaxian schools. He'd never made an impulsive decision in his life. Triax Prime dominated the viewport as they approached, a planet of crystalline towers and geometric perfection. Every building aligned to a master grid. Every street ran precisely parallel or perpendicular. Even the clouds seemed to move in regulated patterns. The Imperial Palace rose from the planet's exact center, a structure of impossible angles and mathematical precision. Mara felt her stomach tighten as their shuttle descended toward the landing platform. 24 Imperial guards escorted her through corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. Every surface gleamed with sterile perfection. Every intersection marked with signs listing relevant regulations. The weight of order pressed down like a physical force. The throne room was a masterpiece of intimidation. The ceiling vaulted upward into darkness. Holographic displays filled the air with streaming data, fleet positions, resource allocations, compliance metrics. At the chamber's heart, upon a throne carved from a single piece of neutronium, sat Emperor Kravix the Systematic. He was enormous for a Triaxian, his scales darker than midnight, polished to mirror brightness. For eyes studied Mara with the intensity of someone examining a particularly interesting virus under a microscope. His robes bore the embroidered text of every major regulation in the Imperial Code. There were thousands of them. Dr. Mara Venn of Earth. His voice resonated through the chamber with artificial amplification. You stand accused of introducing unauthorized organizational modifications across the Imperial fleet. I put up a suggestion box, Your Majesty. The Emperor's scales rippled, irritation. You undermined the chain of proper consultation. You allowed subordinates to communicate directly with leadership. You have infected my orderly empire with chaos. Mara felt her pulse quicken but kept her voice steady. With respect, Your Majesty, I've improved efficiency across every ship that implemented the system. Productivity is up. Errors are down. Your own metrics show improvement. Improvement. The Emperor's roar shook the chamber. Holographic displays flickered. The Empire functioned perfectly before your arrival. We've maintained order for 3 millennia through strict adherence to established procedures. Your empire functioned, Mara agreed. But it didn't adapt. It couldn't innovate. Every good idea trapped in the mind of someone too junior to speak died there. Emperor Kravix descended from his throne, towering over Mara. You humans are chaos incarnate. You question everything. You break rules. You think emotion and impulse superior to logic and order. No, Mara said firmly. We think good ideas can come from anywhere. We think the person doing the job knows that job better than someone who's never done it. We think systems should serve people, not the other way around. Your suggestion box has spread to 147 ships. Junior officers are proposing changes. Technicians are redesigning workflows. Even civilian stations are requesting these democracy boxes. He spat the word like poison. And your empire is running better than ever, Mara countered. Check your data. Emperor Kravix gestured. Holographic screens expanded, showing fleet-wide statistics. Response times down 17%. Maintenance efficiency up 23%. Combat readiness at a 50-year high. Resource waste decreased by 31%. The Emperor stared at the numbers with visible distress. This cannot be. It is. Order must flow from the top downward. That is the foundation of civilization. No, Your Majesty, Mara said gently. That's the foundation of stagnation. Civilization thrives when good ideas flow freely in all directions. Emperor Kravix returned to his throne, his massive form seeming somehow smaller. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then he spoke, his voice quiet. What am I to do with you, Dr. Ven? You could listen, Mara suggested. I have more ideas. The Emperor's scales rippled with what might have been amusement, or horror. Of course you do. The Emperor's dilemma. Emperor Kravix dismissed his guards with a gesture that violated 7 protocols about imperial security. When the chamber doors sealed, leaving him alone with Mara, he seemed less like an absolute ruler and more like an exhausted administrator. Do you know why the Triaxian Empire has endured for 3,000 years? He didn't wait for an answer. Because we eliminated uncertainty. Every action has a procedure. Every procedure has been tested. We removed the chaos of individual judgment and replaced it with the perfection of systematic order. Mara settled into a chair, another protocol violation, sitting without permission, and crossed her legs. How many wars have you fought in the last century? The Emperor's neck spine stiffened. 17 border conflicts. 42 suppression operations. 3 major campaigns against the Zelnari Confederacy. How many did you win decisively? Kravix's silence was answer enough. Your enemies adapt, Mara continued. They improvise. They try new tactics. Meanwhile, your generals follow the Strategic Operations Manual, Edition 47, which hasn't been substantially updated in 200 years. You're fighting tomorrow's wars with yesterday's thinking. Discipline defeats improvisation, Kravix recited. Chapter 3 Verse 12 of the Imperial Military Doctrine. Then why are you losing? The Emperor rose abruptly, pacing the throne room with surprising agility. You understand nothing of governance. Order prevents chaos. Structure prevents collapse. If I allow every subordinate to question procedures, where does it end? Technicians redesigning ships? Soldiers questioning orders? Citizens demanding, what do you humans call it? Voting? You're not listening to me, Mara said firmly. I'm not suggesting anarchy. I'm suggesting you tap into the intelligence you're already paying for. Your people have brains. Use them. They use their brains to follow orders efficiently. No, they use their brains to figure out workarounds when your orders don't make sense. I've seen it. The maintenance crews on the Eternal Protocol invented 17 unofficial procedures to compensate for the gaps in your official ones. They're already improvising, they just have to hide it from you. Emperor Kravix stopped pacing. Explain. Mara pulled out her data pad, displaying photos she'd taken during her time on the flagship. This is a power relay junction. Your official procedure requires a 4-person team and 6 hours to replace a failed module. But technician Rylax figured out that if you remove panel 7 first, which isn't in the manual, 1 person can do it in 90 minutes. She swiped to another image. This is the Navigation Database Update Protocol. Your procedure requires downloading data to a staging server, running diagnostics, getting supervisor approval, then uploading to the main system. 3 days minimum. But Navigator Thissa realized that 80% of updates are routine star chart corrections that never fail diagnostics. She created an automated script that handles those in 20 minutes. Unauthorized modifications, Kravix said, but his voice lacked conviction. Necessary improvements that your system couldn't accommodate. Your people are smart, Your Majesty. They see problems and solve them. But they have to do it in secret because your precious procedures don't have a mechanism for incorporating their innovations. The Emperor returned to his throne, settling into it with a sound like grinding stone. The High Council will never accept this. The Department of Systematic Optimization exists specifically to prevent unauthorized changes. How long does the DSO take to approve a modification? On average, 14 months for minor changes. 47 months for major revisions. Mara laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed in the vast chamber. Your Majesty, technology advances faster than that. Your enemies advance faster than that. The universe doesn't wait for your paperwork. Then what do you propose? Let me run an experiment. Give me 1 fleet, any fleet you choose. Let me implement a comprehensive suggestion system with rapid response evaluation. 6 months. If performance doesn't improve by at least 20% across all metrics, I'll leave Triaxian space and never return. And if you succeed? You institutionalize the system empire-wide. You create official channels for bottom-up innovation. You train your leaders to listen instead of just command. Emperor Kravix's claws drummed against his throne's armrests, a habit he'd suppressed for decades. The sound was almost musical. You're asking me to fundamentally restructure 3,000 years of imperial governance. I'm asking you to add a feedback loop to your system. The structure stays. The hierarchy stays. You just add a mechanism for the structure to learn and improve. The emperor stood, towering over Mara once more. But this time his posture carried less menace and more curiosity. Why do you care? Earth has no stake in the Triaxian Empire's success or failure. Mara met his gaze without flinching. Because I've seen what happens when rigid systems refuse to adapt. They break. Usually catastrophically. And when empires break, billions suffer. She paused. Also, I find your commitment to procedure fascinating. You're not evil, Your Majesty. You genuinely believe order serves your people. I respect that. I just think you can do it better. For the first time in 2 centuries, Emperor Kravix the Systematic made an impulsive decision. You have your experiment, Dr. Venn. I'm assigning you the 5th Fleet under Admiral Korvax. He's conventional, conservative, and completely loyal to traditional procedures. If you can improve his fleet's performance, I'll consider your recommendations. Mara smiled. When do I start? Immediately. And Dr. Venn? The Emperor's scales shimmered with an emotion she couldn't identify. Don't make me regret this. Admiral Korvax's resistance. The 5th Fleet hung in formation around Outpost Sentinel 9, a collection of 73 warships arranged in precise geometric perfection. Admiral Korvax's flagship, the Unwavering Order, dominated the center like a steel cathedral. Mara's shuttle received landing clearance after submitting the required 42 forms. By the time she stepped onto the hangar deck, Admiral Korvax was waiting with an expression that could freeze hydrogen. He was lean for a Triaxian, his scales bearing the silver striations of advanced age and countless campaigns. His uniform displayed 63 commendations, each representing flawless execution of imperial protocol. Behind him stood his command staff, 12 officers whose body language radiated collective disapproval. Dr. Venn. Korvax's voice could cut glass. I've been ordered to cooperate with your experiment. I want you to understand that I do so under protest. The 5th Fleet has the 2nd highest efficiency rating in the Empire. We don't need fixing. Then this should be easy, Mara replied cheerfully. Show me around? The tour was designed to intimidate. Korvax led her through spotless corridors where crew members moved with mechanical precision. He showed her the weapon systems, maintained to specifications so exact they could be measured in micrometers. He demonstrated their communication protocols, which could relay orders to all 73 ships in under 4 seconds. Everything you see, Korvax declared, is the result of unwavering adherence to established procedures. My crews don't improvise. They execute. Perfectly. How long since your last combat engagement? Mara asked. 14 months. We defended Sector 7 Alpha against the Zelnari incursion. Did you win? Korvax's scales tightened. We maintained our position and inflicted acceptable losses before the enemy withdrew. That's not the same as winning. We followed the Strategic Operations Manual precisely. The outcome was within acceptable parameters. Mara stopped walking, forcing Korvax to turn and face her. Admiral, with respect, I've read your after-action reports. The Zelnari used a new formation your manual didn't account for. They adapted mid-battle. You didn't? 3 of your ships suffered critical damage because your tactical responses were predictable. Discipline over improvisation, Korvax recited. A commander who deviates from proven doctrine risks chaos. A commander who can't adapt risks annihilation. The Admiral's neck spines flared. I have fought 17 campaigns, Doctor. I have held this fleet together through situations you cannot imagine. I will not allow a human academic to undermine everything we've built. I'm not trying to undermine anything, Mara said patiently. I'm trying to enhance it. Your people are smart, experienced, and dedicated. They see things you can't see because you're not everywhere at once. Let them help you. Korvax gestured to his command staff. My officers report directly to me. Communication flows through proper channels. And what about the ensign who notices a sensor anomaly but doesn't report it because it's not technically her responsibility? Or the engineer who has an idea for a shield modification but knows the approval process will take 2 years? How many good ideas die because your proper channels are too slow or too narrow? Ideas that circumvent procedure are dangerous. Ideas that die in silence are useless. Mara pulled out a collapsible container from her bag. She'd learned to bring her own materials. I'm installing suggestion collection points on every ship in your fleet. Anonymous submissions, weekly reviews. Your officers will evaluate each suggestion and implement the good ones immediately. Impossible. Implementation requires approval from you. You're the admiral. You have emergency discretionary authority for tactical modifications. Use it. Korvax's 4 eyes blinked in asynchronous sequence. Extreme agitation. You're asking me to abandon centuries of accumulated wisdom based on random notions from subordinates? I'm asking you to add new wisdom to old foundations. The best ideas win regardless of rank. Isn't that logical? The admiral fell silent, clearly wrestling with conflicting impulses. Finally he spoke. 1 month. You may install your collection devices. But I will personally review every submission. And if I find anything that compromises fleet security or operational integrity, this experiment ends immediately. Fair enough, Mara agreed. Over the next week, Mara installed suggestion systems throughout the Fifth Fleet. She held presentations explaining the concept, though the crews remained skeptical. Triaxians had spent their entire lives in rigid hierarchies. The idea of subordinates advising superiors felt fundamentally wrong. The first suggestions trickled in slowly. Most were minor: better organization of supply closets, adjustments to shift schedules, requests for updated equipment. Korvax reviewed each one with the scrutiny of someone examining potential explosives. Then Ensign Lyra from the destroyer Resolute Compliance submitted something different. Her suggestion was technical, detailed, and revolutionary. She'd noticed that the fleet sensor array had a 7-second delay in data integration when multiple ships detected the same object. 7 seconds didn't sound like much, but in combat it could mean the difference between life and death. She proposed a modified algorithm that would reduce the delay to under 2 seconds. Korvax brought it to his senior staff. Chief Engineer Naxum studied the proposal for 3 hours. It would work, Naxum said finally, his voice hushed with something like awe. It's brilliant. Why didn't we think of this? Because Ensign Lyra monitors the sensor data every day, Mara explained. She sees patterns you don't because you're focused on larger strategic concerns. She knows this system intimately. Korvax stared at the proposal as if it might bite him. Implementing it meant acknowledging that a junior officer had seen something he'd missed. It meant admitting that the system wasn't perfect. It meant change. Implement it, he said quietly. Fleet-wide. Immediately. When the modification went live 72 hours later, sensor integration time dropped to 1.8 seconds. Every tactical officer in the fleet noticed the improvement instantly. And something shifted in Admiral Korvax's carefully ordered worldview. The Battle of Krell's Nebula. The Zelnari Confederacy chose the worst possible time to test the Fifth Fleet's defenses. 3 weeks into Mara's experiment, long-range sensors detected a massive Zelnari battle group entering the Krell Nebula, 38 warships moving in an aggressive formation toward Triaxian mining colonies. The Zelnari were insectoid, ruthless, and had spent decades perfecting asymmetric warfare against Triaxian rigidity. Admiral Korvax stood on the bridge of the Unwavering Order, studying the tactical display with his senior staff. Mara observed from a side station, careful not to interfere. Standard defensive formation, Korvax ordered. We'll intercept at navigation point 77 Gamma according to Strategic Operations Manual, Section 12, Protocol 9. The fleet began repositioning with practiced precision. But something was different this time. Captain Theron from the cruiser Steadfast Purpose activated his communication channel. Admiral, request permission to speak. Korvax's scales rippled with surprise. Officers didn't typically interrupt during tactical deployment. Proceed, Captain. Sir, I've been studying the Zelnari formation. It's similar to what they used at Sector 7 Alpha, the engagement where they bloodied us 14 months ago. But 3 of my junior officers submitted a suggestion last week about counter-tactics for exactly this scenario. They've been running simulations. Admiral Korvax glanced at Mara, who kept her expression neutral. What do they propose? Instead of meeting them in open space where they can use their speed advantage, we use the nebula's ion clouds for cover. We split into 3 groups, feint with 1 and strike from 2 unexpected vectors. It violates standard formation doctrine, but it's adaptive, Korvax finished. He studied the tactical display, decades of training warring with weeks of new thinking. The Strategic Operations Manual was clear. Maintain formation integrity, engage from positions of maximum firepower concentration. But the manual had also lost them ships at Sector 7 Alpha. Mara watched the Admiral's internal struggle play across his features. She knew this moment would define the entire experiment. "Captain Theron," Korvax said slowly, "transmit your officer's proposal to all ship commanders. We have 7 minutes to study it before engagement range." He paused, then added words that had never before crossed his lips. "Tactical input from all ships is authorized. If you see a flaw or an improvement, speak immediately." The next 6 minutes transformed the Fifth Fleet's bridge procedures. Suggestions flew across communication channels. Refinements, warnings, tactical nuances from officers who'd studied the Zelnari for years but never had permission to speak. Commander Zelfix, now serving as Korvax's strategic advisor, synthesized the input into a cohesive battle plan. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was nothing like the clean, ordered protocols the Fifth Fleet had followed for generations. It was brilliant. "All ships," Korvax announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority and something new, trust. "Battle Plan Omega is approved. We execute in 90 seconds. And may the systematic order guide us all." The Fifth Fleet dissolved its perfect formation and vanished into the nebula's ion clouds. The Zelnari commander, General Skrax, watched with predatory satisfaction as the Triaxian ships scattered. Exactly as predicted. The rigid Triaxians were breaking formation, clearly panicking. He'd won before the first shot was fired. "All ships, pursue," Skrax clicked in his species' chittering language. "Standard envelopment pattern. They're running scared." His fleet surged forward, spreading wide to trap the fleeing Triaxians. Then the trap snapped shut. The Steadfast Purpose and 12 other ships erupted from the nebula's dense core, appearing directly behind the Zelnari left flank. Before Skrax could react, their weapons tore through his lighter cruisers like paper. Skrax tried to wheel his formation to respond, but Admiral Korvax had anticipated exactly that. The unwavering order led a second group in a devastating strike against the Zelnari command ship, while a third Triaxian group, the one that had appeared to flee, reversed course and trapped the enemy in a deadly crossfire. The Zelnari had trained to fight predictable Triaxians. They had no response for Triaxians who adapted. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 11 Zelnari ships were destroyed, 23 crippled, and the remainder fleeing at maximum velocity. The Fifth Fleet suffered minor damage to 4 vessels and 0 casualties. It was the most decisive Triaxian victory in 50 years. Admiral Korvax stood on his bridge in stunned silence, staring at the tactical display. Around him, his crew erupted in something Triaxians rarely expressed: unrestrained joy. "Admiral," Commander Zelfix said, his voice trembling, "we should document this engagement. The Strategic Operations Manual will need to be updated." Korvax turned to Mara, who stood quietly at her observation station. The Admiral's scales displayed colors she'd never seen, a mixture of triumph, humility, and something that might have been gratitude. "Dr. Venn," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. And an admission." He gestured at the tactical display. "This victory didn't come from my experience or my adherence to doctrine. It came from ensigns and junior officers whose names I barely know. They saw what I couldn't see because they were looking from different angles." "They were always smart, Admiral," Mara replied. "You just gave them permission to show it." Korvax nodded slowly. "I've spent 40 years believing that wisdom flows downward through rank. Today I learned it can flow in any direction, if we're willing to listen." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a priority message to Emperor Kravix. Inform His Majesty that the Fifth Fleet has achieved a decisive victory using non-standard tactics developed through, what did you call it, Dr. Venn?" "Bottom-up innovation, Admiral." "Bottom-up innovation," Korvax repeated, testing the words like exotic food. "Also inform the Emperor that I recommend immediate empire-wide implementation of collaborative suggestion systems." He paused, then added with the hint of a smile, "And tell him that Admiral Korvax admits he was wrong. The Empire divided." News of the Fifth Fleet's victory spread through Triaxian space like a quantum shockwave. Within days, Admiral Korvax became a celebrity, an unprecedented development in a society that valued conformity over individual recognition. His after-action report, which praised junior officers by name and credited their suggestions for the tactical success, was downloaded 7 billion times. The Empire fractured into 2 camps almost immediately. Emperor Kravix convened an emergency session of the High Council in the Grand Chamber of Deliberation. Mara stood in the center of the circular room, surrounded by the Empire's most powerful officials. The holographic attendance roster showed 847 council members present, ranging from military leaders to bureaucratic department heads. Chancellor Vornis, head of the Department of Systematic Optimization, spoke first. He was ancient even by Triaxian standards, his scales dulled to near gray. Your Majesty, this human's experiment has created dangerous precedent. Officers are questioning orders. Technicians are modifying equipment without authorization. I've received reports of crew members forming discussion groups. He said the words as if describing a plague. Discussion groups where they solve problems, Mara interjected. On the cruiser Eternal Vigilance, a discussion group identified a flaw in the life support backup system that your inspectors missed for 3 years. They fixed it in 4 hours. Unauthorized modifications. Vornis's neck spines quivered with rage. What if they had made an error? What if their fix had catastrophically failed? What if your authorized procedures keep missing critical flaws? Mara countered. How many problems go unfixed because the people who see them aren't authorized to speak? Fleet Admiral Draxos, commander of the Second Fleet, rose to support her. Chancellor, I've implemented Dr. Ven's suggestion systems across my entire fleet. In 6 weeks, we've improved efficiency by 28%. My ships are faster, stronger, and more ready for combat than ever. By abandoning the procedures that have kept us strong for millennia. Vornis shot back. Admiral Korvax's victory was luck. Chaos masquerading as tactics. It wasn't luck, Admiral Korvax said, his voice cutting through the chamber. He'd been summoned from the Fifth Fleet to testify. It was adaptation. The Zelnari have been defeating us because we've become predictable. Dr. Ven didn't teach us chaos, she taught us to think. The debate raged for hours. Mara watched as the council divided along ideological lines. Younger officials and field commanders gravitated toward her reforms. Older bureaucrats and traditionalists dug in against change. The Triaxian Empire, so unified for centuries, was tearing itself apart over a cardboard box and the radical idea that good ideas could come from anywhere. Finally, Emperor Kravix raised his hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet instantly. Dr. Ven, the Emperor said, his voice carrying none of its usual amplification, you've created a crisis. Before your arrival we had order. Now we have factions. Debate. Uncertainty. He descended from his elevated throne, moving through the council to stand directly before her. Tell me honestly, is this better? Mara met his gaze without flinching. Your Majesty, you didn't have order. You had stagnation dressed up as order. Yes, there's debate now. Yes, there's uncertainty. That's because your people are thinking, questioning, improving. That's uncomfortable, but it's not chaos. It's growth. Growth, Kravix repeated. The High Council is paralyzed by disagreement. 3 departments have filed formal protests. The Department of Historical Preservation claims I'm destroying our cultural heritage. Is this the improvement you promised? The improvement is in your fleets, your stations, your colonies. The improvement is measurable in every metric that actually matters. Efficiency, innovation, morale, combat readiness. Mara pulled up her data pad, projecting empire-wide statistics. Ships using suggestion systems show 32% better maintenance records. Stations implementing collaborative problem-solving report 41% fewer critical failures. Your empire is objectively functioning better than it has in decades. But it feels chaotic, Chancellor Vornis insisted. The foundation of civilization is order. Without strict hierarchy, without absolute procedures, everything crumbles. No, Mara said firmly. The foundation of civilization is people working together to solve problems. Hierarchy and procedures are tools, not goals. When the tools stop serving the people, you need better tools. Emperor Kravix walked a slow circle around Mara, his massive form radiating contemplation. You forced me to question everything I've built my reign upon. Do you understand how destabilizing that is? I understand it's terrifying. But Your Majesty, the universe is changing faster than ever. New technologies, new threats, new opportunities. You can either adapt and thrive, or cling to the past and slowly become irrelevant. Mara softened her voice. You're not destroying your empire. You're saving it. The Emperor stopped walking. For a long moment he stood perfectly still, a statue of power and uncertainty. Then he turned to face his High Council. I'm implementing Dr. Ven's reforms empire-wide. Every ship, every station, every administrative department will establish collaborative suggestion systems within 60 days. The Department of Systematic Optimization will be restructured to evaluate and implement innovations rather than simply enforce existing procedures. Chancellor Vornis's scales flushed crimson. Your Majesty, I must protest. Your protest is noted, Chancellor. It will be added to the permanent record. But my decision is final. Kravix's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. For 3,000 years, we've perfected the art of maintaining order. Now we'll perfect the art of maintaining order while embracing progress. You turn back to Mara. You'll serve as Imperial Advisor for Organizational Innovation. Your mandate is to help us adapt without losing our identity. Can you do that? Mara smiled. I can try, Your Majesty. With your people's help. Of course, with their help, Kravix said, and for the first time, Mara heard what might have been amusement in his voice. That's the entire point, isn't it? The High Council erupted in discussion. Some excited, others horrified, all uncertain. The Triaxian Empire was changing, and no one knew exactly where it would lead. But for the first time in centuries, it was moving forward instead of simply maintaining position. And in the back of the chamber, junior technician Rylax, who dropped the first suggestion into Mara's box all those weeks ago, allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction.